Okay, people, now the time has come that you've been waiting for. As you know, we rely on our community for stories, and the community is absolutely awesome. We have a vast collection of stories in our repertoire, all about Sota and other things as well. So we've received a new entry recently from Aurora Boreallis, all about Doragrond, a dwarf, and his progress, and Alleine has been working on it. I must say she's done a stellar job. So without further ado, by the way, the music is from PGN Music, which is sort of owned by Paradox Games. They've graciously given us permission to use music from their site, and incidentally they actually decided to follow Avatar's Radio. So look at that, our 300th follower. I am so excited about that. Okay, without further ado, here it is.
Good evening, dear listeners. You're tuned into podcasts and poetry, hosted by Asclepius on Avatar's Radio, where the magic of storytelling brings us together under the canopy of imagination. Tonight, we present to you a tale of intrigue and adventure, a journey through a world where fate and willpower intertwine. Fasten the latches of your reality as we embark on this journey. Doragrond's story, Prologue, the summary of my life so far. Written by Shroud of the Avatar community member Aurora Boreallis, and audio production by Alleine Dragonfyre. So sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. Our tale begins on a chilly evening in a tavern where the echoes of the past whisper through the walls.
I sat with particular regard for the early evening traffic outside the tavern window and the world beyond. I sipped a warmed citrus ale and ate a favourite repast from these parts appropriate to the end of the workday in late winter, early spring. Folk wanted to be indoors before too long to sit by a stoked fire and eat their suppers. I recalled a similar season from my childhood long and long ago. I did not think much about those days so far removed. Indeed, I barely remembered my first family at all. At this time of day, we would have kept labouring until the light failed, or we risked being run off the land. That's what the younger me remembered. I later learned that reality was different, less harsh in our special circumstance from what our mothers told us to keep us busy and out of most kinds of trouble. Even on those chilly days, there was plenty to do with the planting only weeks away. Because I was so young, I was always given the easy, repetitive work to do. Then, Mother Dora and the other women would prepare a quick meal which we barely had enough energy to consume before crashing to our cots already asleep. By all accounts, fate is a cruel mistress. I sometimes recall that when I stop moving for too long. On the very day I failed to rise in the wee early hours for the day's labours, I began to forget that life. In a flash, my world turned to cold sand as a forceful onset of those abrasive grains upon my face commenced. They said I came into the custody of the local prefecture, not as a criminal, but as a vagabond. I had not understood what that meant. They said I was found wandering the fields next to the North Road, barefoot, face caked with dried blood, and no awareness in my countenance. I was not far from home, they said. I seemed to be completely unaware of the corpses strewn everywhere. It had become their favorite game to taunt me because I had reacted badly one time, drawing the ire of one particularly cruel elder scribe, whose name and face I have since refused to remember. The beating inflicted upon me for breaking that older boy's nose was worth it. After all, I didn't start the conflict, but it kept the other boys off me for a good amount of time. I had learned quickly to not be so smug about winning any fights or enduring the resulting beatings, or it would earn me extra punishment. According to those other boys, not even the marauders that day wanted to waste effort on a runt dwarf like me. They said the constables carted me off after a few days' healing, to the Archmage Tower to become an apprentice to the Master Mage's scribes. As I learned from overheard conversations, apparently they thought I was young enough to not have learned bad habits. I would be teachable, and I would probably have no cause to embarrass the Master Magus' house. Well, that was their plan. As I saw it, I had made no agreement to behave, so I was free to raise havoc, in true dwarven form, in any way I could manage while not being discovered. I earned quite a few whacks across my knuckles before getting the feel of what I could do, versus what I should do in any given situation. What can I say to that, other than never has any plan survived contact with the enemy? Plans change when survival is on the line. Such recollections are pointless and wasted effort. It was one important lesson I'd learned well from those early years. I used to know quite a lot about hard effort, until the most recent few cycles, that is. I supposed I had become too comfortable. Yes, that was the word I groped for. Comfortable. The tavern keep had the nerve to label me corpulent a few weeks past. I was surprised his vocabulary included the word. Cheeky fellow, my old master would have called him. I was glad to have stifled my urge to pop him in the jaw as a demonstration of the strength a corpulent dwarf still possessed. Yes, I was certainly corpulent, but my new vow of hard work had set me down a different path. Upon arriving in town, I had decided to not reveal my numerous other skills, so I had made a deal to do work for my room and board. It had taken me far too long to cut, chop, and stack enough wood for the next few evenings' hearth. I remember I was quite sweat-soaked, and my pungent warning preceded me through the door. I was asked to eat outside that evening. The shivering cold on my soaked body did wonders for my attitude. I vowed to finish my assigned daily work well in advance of the dinner crowd from then on, so I could get to my small room without disturbing the paying folk. On days when there was little to be accomplished at the tavern, I had been loaned out to other people in town. At the smithy one day, the blacksmith had long desired some rearranging of his tools and work area and wanted to take advantage of my prodigious abilities while I was available. During the course of those strenuous labors, he thought he had noticed my hands leaving finger-shaped impressions in the anvil. It had always been the most well-kept family secret that our lineage possessed the ability to shape rock and metals with our bare hands upon application of the proper will set forth on those materials. I had let my ruminations slip just enough to lose a critical portion of awareness in my surroundings, and the mistake had been complete. I had quickly corrected my blunder, as well as those I found undiscovered in the grindstone, but left them polished where my skin had touched the surfaces. Seeing his concern, in jest and to cover my careless mistake, I had said with the perfect amount of indignation, "I won't be doing no dishes here. A man's hands should not be softer than the axe he wields. Certainly my hands can proudly scrape the rust free of any neglected tool. After the laughter died, Downey had forgot any imagined offense or damage. I realized after that incident that it was imperative that I recover a good measure of the crafty ways I had come to relax. As always, I had to be sure to be in tune with my sense of impending doom so as to not be caught unaware and flat-footed in my comfortable situation. Added to that, I had to be more careful that no such further blunders occurred. A certain craftsman with his cart and tools swaying just so in the lower light passed my window, which sparked my reverie anew. I suppose the stars had shown their beneficence upon me far too long in that place. I had dared to become content. Elder Master Scribe Longchalk told me after some months under his tutelage that I seemed to be taking on my role as his personal assistant very comfortably. If I only knew then half of what that hag fate has since taught me about being comfortable. Elder Master Scribe Longchalk told me that I would not be permitted to become an apprentice in the Master Mage's house because I was lowborn, that the mage was too steeped in old tradition to let me rise above my station. My master, as I had come to call him, taught me that just because it was not permitted for me to apprentice did not mean that I could not learn as much as my brain could store. He taught me many things which were supposed to have been forbidden to me. He risked much in doing so, and thereby taught me to be crafty about letting others observe my activities. He did not fail to mention these skills would become a great boon to me later in life, should I choose to move on to another locale as an adult. Early on, he instructed me that I should release my mistaken hatred of my given name, that I must give it the respect my first parents had intended. He said that Dor was not a proper name for me, and neither was Dora, my mother's name. He said that the constable's messenger had referred to me upon my transfer to the tower as Doragrond, and I learned for the first time that my father would likely have been a highly respected dwarven craftsman, as our people's custom would have been to add a form of that skill, Grondan or perhaps Grondrogn, to finish the given name of his children. I secretly hoped it was the latter. For obvious reasons, an outfitter's skill set would have been far more glamourful and far less common than a weaver's. My father's skills would have demanded that he be summoned to castle life sometime during the war-torn decades since our people had fled their homeland. I only remember my mother had missed him dearly. Because I never knew my father, my master gave me his surname so that I would have a measure of respect due someone of his station. He also bestowed upon me a secret name that he said would be quite significant to my life, the meaning of which was never made clear to me. He said I must keep the name in mind always and never divulge it to another living soul. Thus, I became Doragrond Erasmus Longchalk for my life's journey. Over several years I had amassed more knowledge during my free time than I would have gained in 7 lifetimes as a land labourer. I came to understand that my master served the Archmage Arguilius, whose tower keep was an exceedingly high-value target in the wars that had grown much more energetic over the years I had lived there. So war eventually came to us. Abruptly, years of learning came to an end. My voracious studies of languages, peoples, foreign lands and their customs, elocution lessons, scribing skills, and even the occasional peek into the arcane spell research was nearly all I took with me. I had a small pack with a few lightweight valuables I was supposed to keep safe and hand over to the scribes or mages at the castle. Cold sand behind, cold sand ahead, I thought to myself while realization seeped into me. To grasp at sand while other forces were applied was certainly an exercise in futility. I was instructed that I must make a hasty 2-day retreat to Castle Rallybane and tell them of our observations of the advancing enemy. It was well over 2 days by the time I arrived, as 1, I had not been able to attach myself to a fleeing wagon team, and 2, my stature was of diminutive size. Already there was talk of retaking the tower and rescuing prisoners, but there was little air of optimism. I learned later that the Master Mage had been so skilled and so powerful that he had nearly turned the tide of the battle against an opposing force almost thrice the size of his garrison. The Master of Mages at the castle eyed me suspiciously as I faithfully discharged into his care the bundle of valuables I had been tasked to transport. I briefly gave him a verbal assessment of the situation as I had memorized before leaving, and then, word for word, told him my instructions concerning the bundle. "You're sure they said those exact words to relay to me?" he asked with growing interest. I nodded my compliance, and indicating the bundle showed him the bindings were still undisturbed, adding that there was nothing of interest to me in the package. He rewarded me well in coin for the items and the information, but made no move to press me into his service as a scribe. Just as well, I thought, for I was already sorted into my next vocation. Before I could turn away, one of his seers held up a hand for me to stop. After several moments of peering at me rather oddly, he told me I needed prognostication of my doom-giving, which, supposedly, he could tell by my aura, had never been received. This drew shocked nods and stares from others in the room. He instructed that it was exceedingly odd for a boy of my teenage years to have never received one, and that could be not only a dangerous omen for me, but also for those around me. Chanting some arcane-sounding gibberish over me in a corner for several minutes revealed that I was an autumn child, for I could tell him neither of my actual birth nor the season thereof, and the words that I should live by for the rest of my life were etched upon me by none other than fate herself. The shadows stalk hungrily. Among the tangle of gasps and whispers, I overheard one of them mutter that it was a highly unusual doom-giving indeed. I was reassured by the seer that the dominion of that fickle spirit was neither good nor evil, but her servants, the shadows, hounds of extraordinary skill, hunted for easy and unaware prey to focus her doom upon. While I had learned of this superstitious sort of nonsense before, I graciously kept those feelings to myself. And thus was my introduction to fate made manifest. We were destined to become more entwined than we had been already as the years plodded onward. Outside the window, a panicked horse spilling his owner's wares on the frosty, slippery cobblestones brought me back to the present. Clearly the cause was most likely some hated enemy such as a rat. Snakes would not have roused themselves at this time of year, although it certainly could have been an editorial comment by the beast about his owner's treatment. I had learned much about horses at Castle Raleigh-Bayne, and I realized I could likely teach much to this presumed merchant, for he was such a man judging by the nature of the scattered wares, as well as the fact that he led the animal rather than rode it. He apparently did not have an appraising eye for packing a balanced load. Horses and warfare had become my true profession, nay, my true calling in those long years. The first minister's man who greeted me on arrival in the castle courtyard had hours previously sorted me into the area just beyond stables after a thorough session of questions. Apparently someone with my given name would have been most useful there. I tried to object, stating my practiced vocation, but was cut off. I tried again, for I did not know my true father, and I told him so. He said it did not matter. It was just as good a focus as any to pour my soul into. Looking back across the span of years, I think that man was influenced in that moment somehow, for he knew absolutely nothing about me. All the signs were there, according to the teaching I had received. However, I gave it no more thought at the time. In my studies at the tower, I had learned the objective view of an outfitter's life, but it took weeks to gain a subjective appreciation of the wide scope of skills needed to be a really good apprentice. The journeyman I was assigned to, a man named Jacobson, gave me 2 days on each skill to learn and be proficient at one thing in that skills arena. It quickly became apparent that I excelled at almost every task, learning more skills in the allotted time than was expected. So I was timed in assembly, tested in knowledge, and evaluated for quality and accuracy at the pace of a second year as I completed my 9th week of apprenticeship. My former master's teachings had prepared me well for this part of my life. I wished he could have observed my progress now. Would he have been proud of me? My feeling on that thought was in the affirmative, and internally I saw that he would have been proud of my use of vocabulary too. My eye shaped a tear at the thought, but as it fell, it seemingly evaporated instantly, landing nowhere. Life at Castle Raleigh-Bayne was hard, as my successes in my labors and studies were so much recognized that I was pressed into the most labor-intensive tasks imaginable, which sculpted me into an impressive sample of the dwarven race. Soon none would call me scrawny or tease me like I had become accustomed to over the previous several years. Hard as stone yet gentle with the horses I had come to think of as my only friends. I had a certain affinity with those beasts that others viewed as uncanny. For all my hard work, there were also rewards and comforts to enjoy, but sparingly. If I were human, there would have been companionship. However, I didn't know what I was missing, so I shrugged it off once again. I learned that there were other Grondrogan who apprenticed here, though many apparently would not survive the rigors of provisioning an army in wartime, as, according to Jacobson, they either weren't worth a horse's spit or were dumber than a box of rocks. Outfitters were responsible for the multifaceted work of keeping an army well supplied, mobile, and ready to do what they do best, which obviously was the craft of the warrior. In the weeks before my life's path led me to become a journeyman, I was sent to receive cross-training from craftsmen whose skills would enhance my own. In one such stop on that journey, I learned from the leathercrofts about crafting and repairing tack and saddle, and also of hardened leather armors. While I needed to have some knowledge of these skills, I was told I would not be expected to produce any amount of it, because my focus would be to direct their skills to a specific outcome rather than do it myself. I so enjoyed the work and the company of the joyful leathercrofts that I did pour my soul into that work, which lasted as long as anything in my life. That is to say, far too short for my liking. Most outfitter apprentices and journeymen concentrated on just one specialization, such as heavy machinery like siege weapons, the infantry or cavalry. The rare, overachieving Grondron master did it all, utilizing all the apprentices and journeymen at his disposal to accomplish his specific orders. So I applied my studies in the direction of the cavalry. If I were to gain a master's status, I would be allowed to have my choice of focus, perhaps from numerous paths, but for most of my middle years I was glad to have been dedicated to the Dragoon Company. There, I learned of horse training and horse care to a great extent, and earned the responsibility to teach potential warriors about their mounts. I learned the knack of rider-to-mount mental bonding, which I attempted to teach on multiple occasions, completely unaware that in the entire nation, only I possessed that ability. I learned to perfect the proportioning and packing of gear for both long-range and short-range scouting patrols. I learned that preparing for skirmishes, engagements, and campaigns was far less precise, but took far more effort because of tasks such as the facilitation of the cooks who fed the mobilized army. I learned of the pistol, the saber, and the lance, the three main weapons of the Dragoon cavalry units. I learned that I would need to anticipate the needs of each cavalry classification, and therefore was expected to know something of the craft of the warrior. And so, I became more than a wee bit of a warrior myself, as I applied my training in earnest. A well-outfitted army drew the attention, praise, and reward of the lord of the castle, and I enjoyed a high status for a comfortable number of years. It also drew his wrath in the opposing case, the reward of which I wore like a badge of honor across the jaw and ear on my left side. I did not blame my lord, because anyone could be fooled with the covert level of malice and intent I observed. It mattered little where the superficial blame lay. I'd made a vow to myself to search out and destroy those whose treachery was responsible for my expulsion. Quite often that trail grew cold, only to heat up again at odd times, much like the sand from my youth. So I applied that learning here as well, attempting to grasp at sand, but noting as I did so which other forces eroded that grasp on abrasive grains. I began to track a master of illusory powers, for I had learned from hounds of the highest caliber how to track my intended prey. Outside influences indeed. Sometime in the last while, the tavern keep had refreshed my seasoned ale without my notice. I signaled my appreciation and received the usual curt nod in return. I suspect, since the quality and quantity of my work had increased several-fold without a commensurate increase in my pay, he thought an occasional random reward was due. The work had started to tone my muscles again, just as I remembered. It reminded me that I enjoyed being sinew-sore and tired from good, honest work. I was appreciative of the pay just as it was. There was absolutely nothing wrong with riches, but mostly I could barter for or make what I needed with very little coin. Riches drew unwanted attention. I could feel fate giving me a gentle and familiar nudge. Thank the stars that was all it was to be this time. The time had come to make another move. I was keenly aware of the dangers of being too comfortable. This place had given me what I needed at the right time. Where would I be off to tomorrow? I would have to break the news gently to my valued employer tonight. I did not much worry. He was well stocked and organised, given the new pantry I had added onto the back and the expanded cellar, which afforded storage of a wider selection of drink and food. A man with penetrating eyes wearing a dark trail cloak and possessing a very sturdy lockbox approached my table and appraised me silently for a moment before sitting across from me. He seemed to require a discreet travel companion. I decided in the smallest flash of a moment to pick up my crafty ways once again as I slipped back into the familiar dwarven Highland brogue of my far earlier days as we conversed. Sometimes the less a person knows about ye, the better 'tis to get along, I mused to myself. Aye, I thought without revealing even the slightest hint that I'd already noticed. I had the measure of him already.
And so, our journey through the highlands and the depths of one dwarf's destiny comes to a close, for now. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable adventure, a tale of resilience, mystery, and the unyielding spirit of the heart. You were listening to Doragrond's story, Prologue, the summary of my life so far. Tonight's story is written by Shroud of the Avatar community member Aurora Boreallis, and brought to life by the voice Matthew on ChatGPT using the plugin 11 Labs. For radio broadcast, this audio production is engineered by Alleine Dragonfyre for Avatars Radio. All music for this piece is by PGN Music at pgnmusic.com. Sound effects were provided by members of freesound.org. For full credits, please visit avatarsradio.rocks production notes. For more enchanting tales and unforgettable journeys, stay tuned for more podcasts and poetry with Asclepius every other Sunday. Until next time, keep the spirit of stories alive in your hearts, and may your own journeys be ever filled with courage and wonder. Good night and sweet dreams.
And that, I'm sure you'll agree, was an amazing production. A wonderful story, spellbinding, and so interesting, and masterfully done by Alleine Dragonfyre. When Alleine dropped the finished product over to me, I played it, and I thought, oh my God, you're raising the bar so high. I'm going to have to work really hard to try and keep up with this. So yes, I guess I'm going to have to be putting more work into my podcasts. But, well, look, the quality will improve, so that's all good. So congratulations to Aurora Boreallis for a wonderful story. Yes, I'm looking forward to the next chapter as well. I hope it comes very quickly. And yeah, we'll let you have it as soon as we get it. Okay, moving right along with the rest of our program. You're listening to Podcasts and Poetry on Avatars Radio, Radio of the Avatars.
Are you looking for action, adventure, and epic loot? Avatar Relics can't really help you with the first two, but we have the third one in the bag. Use code AvatarsRadio at avatarrelics.com.
You are tuned in to Avatars Radio, independent community radio of the Avatars. This special message is to thank you for your years of support, Avatars. We count on our Avatar patrons to keep our lights on and broadcasting all of your great music and dramatic audio works. If you choose to become a patron of Avatars Radio, that means you are a patron of the metaverse arts and a guardian of the airwaves. Congrats! Achievement unlocked. Special thanks to our current Patreon supporters, Istril Maroa, avatarrelics.com and Ghost Turtle. To learn how you can become a patron and guardian of the airwaves, visit avatarsradio.rock/patron today.
You are listening to Avatars Radio. Radio of the Avatars. When our DJs aren't live, our content is 100% community created. If you are a musician or other audio artist and would like to have your work aired on Avatars Radio, contact us today.